I want to welcome everyone out this evening. I want to welcome you to the new location. I want to thank Gail. Are you here? Gail here this evening? I heard earlier. I want to thank Gail Olson for making this venue available to us. As many of you know, we normally meet at the Carlsbad Safety Center, but due to remodeling that they've been promising for years and told us about just before the meeting last month, we have found the need to meet in another place, and this is it. Okay, let's see. Jim, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to do a couple of reports first, and we'll get on with most of our program. First one would be the Peter site report. Michelle, would you be kind enough to give us a report on what's been done and what needs to be done?
Check your scopes for what's been done on the repeater site. We've been doing a lot of work. This next Saturday, July 9th, is going to be our regular work party from 10 a.m. until 12 noon. I eat breakfast at Mother's Kitchen at 9 a.m., so please feel free to join me. If you know how to get to the repeater site, then just join up at 10. This particular work party will hopefully focus on tower repairs. We have some antennas that need some attention. So I'm looking for people that have experience and equipment to climb the tower and to possibly bring down some antennas. We have some refurbishment that we need to do on several different types of antennas. Another highlight of this particular work party will be getting the auto patch up and running again. It's been having some trouble. We know what we need to do, and we're going to attempt to do it on Saturday. And the third interesting aspect of this work party is to admire and welcome our brand new steel storage container. It's currently empty, and I hope it won't be empty for long. So please join me if you can, July 9th, 10 a.m. to noon. As I said, breakfast at 9 a.m. They're all invited to come, especially people who know how to climb towers. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, hopefully we'll see a few of you up there. Okay, next thing, I want to give a short field day report. Many of us participated in field day this year, right down off the freeway at Wood Lake, actually on Santar and Rancheros. We had a really good turnout. We're still in the process of collating all our records, but I want to give a special thanks to a few people that really made it happen. Amongst, of course, the team captains such as Dennis N6KI and Paul with the W6NK, and of course Rod EC6V and the others. I want to give a special thanks to Wild Bill and to Ellen for making their equipment available to us and taking much of the labor and danger out of getting the towers up and down. I want to thank those folks because they made a tremendous difference. We also have a few other things. We're still always looking for volunteers, as every organization is. We're looking for volunteers to help us with the membership committee to bolster our membership. We are going back up again, which is a good thing. But we want some help in not only in contacting people, but also generating ideas on how to make things better. We also have a training committee. We're going to look for what can the club do to help hams in the local area. And so if we're looking to build some training, one of those things is, of course, is going to be covered by today's program, is just one of the aspects of training as far as what I have in mind. But there's also people that want to upgrade. We've got to get people that are interested in getting their technician license to begin with, so on and so forth. August meeting will be on tea hunting. We'll be in this room. There's a general upgrade class in La Mesa. Anyone that's interested in obtaining general, there's going to be both code and theory starting Saturday the 9th, this coming Saturday, and running for 4 weeks in La Mesa. Anyone interested in that, talk to me after the program here. And then my question, do we have any announcements from the floor? I would imagine from Aries, and let's start with Art.
Okay. One of our club members, K6MS,
Any other announcements from the floor? Dennis?
Found these in the mail the other day. Kind of nice. For those that don't have similar ones, they're $21. And it's not an annual environmental fee. It's a one-time fee. They're transferable to new vehicles. And I even have applications here.
Last and the best deals from California.
Get them while you can, because the price will go up. Guarantee that. Can't figure out how to stop spending. Okay, anything else from the floor? A couple of years worth of QST up on the stage. He's looking for a new home. All right? Be a good source of information. If anyone is not familiar with QST magazine, you need to go take a look. For those of you are, you might need to go take a look anyway. Okay, want to do some introductions here. Mike, did Mike make it tonight? 86 QT. It's not. That's our repeater technical chair. John Ernest here this evening. That's our new member chair. We are looking for a new member chair. John, his schedule is such that he feels that we need to groom a new person to help out with the new members. We're looking for someone that's been a hand for less than a year. If you're interested in getting involved, talk to me after the meeting. Membership, Al Dunleavy. Is Al here this evening? Right here. You want to pay dues? You want to join the club? Al is our man. One to talk to. Repeater site is Michelle. We've already heard from Michelle. Very important. Going to keep us all functioning and being able to use the repeaters. Mark just came in, KF6WTN. This is director number 2, Tom. Where's Tom? Director number 1, Tom Martin. Saw Joe around here somewhere. Joe Ashley. Getting a little busy here. And then, of course, now, I know Paul's got to be here, and I'm not paying attention. KB6NU. What's that? KB5NU. Yeah, I thought I heard him earlier. I thought he was going to be here this evening. And then Dennis, we just heard from KD6TUJ with the personalized plates, our vice president, and I'm Steve, 86VI. And a lot of faces I'm not familiar with here. So if you're a visitor, we'd like you to stand up and introduce yourself, if you at all could. Or maybe I need to be here more often. Do we have anyone new? Yes.
I'm Christy Martin, and I'm working on doing my checklist.
Good for you. I know there's a few hiding in the back because I brought them myself.
Kirk Presley, I came last month, so I'm a visitor again.
Well, welcome aboard, and we hope to make it regular.
I'm Dee Early, 86GQT, his better half.
Right next to you, stand up, say who you are. Where's your sister and your brother? They're hiding.
They're not in here.
This is Stephanie, one of mine. Other visitors tonight. Okay.
Tony Antonet, KG6AMP, I'm a friend of Lawrence who invited me.
Good company here. Anyone else?
I got here.
N6NP. N6NP. Well, welcome aboard. You've all heard me talking up, so let's get down to business. Jerry Costro, aka 6QJ, is giving our program this evening, and it's by the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. And Jerry, the floor is yours.
Okay. First thing, can everybody hear me? All right, because otherwise I have to use this thing, and it's not food, so I don't want this too close to my mouth. I'll leave it over there. Let's see, I'm going to be filmed tonight. This is the third time in like 2 weeks that somebody has put a camera on me. I was on the CDM patrol on Monday, and I got to drive around with the Channel 10 cameraman for like half an hour. So please be gentle. If my voice...
Jerry, we have a lady.
Sorry, I missed an announcement. It's my fault.
Right.
But it's important, so I wanted to make it. A lot of you old timers who might remember N5CG, Hal Ingram, he passed away July 2nd. He became Silent Key up in Washington, where he and his wife moved to be near the grandkid. And for those of you who knew Hal, he was always was very interested in just about everything in the planet, and continued that way. The doctors told him he wouldn't live past maybe 10 or 11 years old, and he proved them wrong for about another 55 years. Anyway, we're all going to miss him. There is a memorial up at his place in Washington on August 21st. And I talked to his wife, Jo, and she asked that if anybody wanted to do anything during the memorial, they're going to have just emails and things, little stories about Hal. As you remember, he was very active on 146730. So if anybody has anything, they can just email me, and I'll make sure that it gets up to them. KF6WTN at AMSAT. Sorry again about bothering you.
Oh, no problem. No problem. These things have to you have to deal with it. Anyway, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about emergency response in ours. Can everybody still hear me? Can everybody see the board? Do you have any more lights that we can turn on? Maybe? Turn down the lights as long as you promise not to snort. Good. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about REs, and we're going to talk, even more importantly, we're going to talk about emergency communications. How many people here are basically involved in emergency communications either through REs or through RACES or through CDF or through anyone? Okay, so about maybe a quarter to a third, which means that 2/3 to 3/4 probably have heard on the radio during emergencies or during practice drills what we do, but you don't really have a good idea. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about REs, and we're going to talk a little bit about emergency communications in general. And I want to spend most of my time on emergency communications because, especially for you folks that are not quite involved in emergency communications like some of us, it's a pretty important thing to look. Oh, California. What can I say about California? We are so amusing to the rest of the country. We had a little earthquake, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago? I remember it well because we were having our Sunday morning emergency night. And it was a 5.2 bumper. It shook us up Carlsbad for about 2 to 3 seconds. There wasn't a whole lot to write home about, but you would think from the media that this was, a big one. It was and they would report not only the 5.2, which was reported, but for several days afterwards, every little 2.4, 2.1, 1.6, the 0.7 earthquake. I mean, they were doing this. So the rest of the country, they take a look at us and what can you say about California? Their lifestyle, their government, and now, once again, California is a shake and bake state. Those of us who live in California know that shake and bake is a lot more serious than what people in Boston or people in Chicago or people in Detroit. Because many of us have experienced firsthand what can happen in the state as far as earthquakes and wildfires, which are our two main natural disasters that we have. Plus hazardous waste, terrorism, you name it, we are exposed to. Large population in a very inhospitable part of the world. For example, we take a look at this map. This is from the San Diego State University. They have a really neat page on the 2003 fire. This is the fire history of San Diego from 1900 to 1997. All those little red splotches that you see in there, orange spot, green, yellow, are all fires that occurred over that 100-year period. And this is only up to 1997. There's a couple of gray areas in here that really didn't experience a fire during that 97-year period. Guess what? When we had the Cedar Fire and the Paradise Fire, those are now splotched too. So just about any place in the county can be subjected to disaster. We take a look at our other major disaster that we, or other major disasters that we can have. Earthquakes. We have 4 major fault zones that go through this area. We have this is called the Newport Inglewood Rose Canyon Fault. Then we have the Elsinore Fault, we have the San Jacinto Fault, and then we have the San Andreas Fault. Each one of those can top at least a 7. Which, if you compare that to our little 5.2 that we had, the 7.2 puts out about 900 times more energy. Which means instead of shaking for 2 or 3 seconds, we can be shaking for 2 or 3 minutes. And all the attention. Anywhere along this line, even that 8 that's out there in the desert can cause us a lot of problems over there. What we talk about from a regional disaster standpoint is communications. We're amateur radio types. That is what we can do. That's what we support is regional communications. If we have a regional disaster, we're going to have disrupted commercial communications, and that's going to be isolation for a large number of people. And when we're talking about isolation, we're talking about how we can grab the world right now with the internet and telephones and cell phones. And when you don't have any of that stuff, what happens is that your world kind of shrinks to as far as you can see, as far as you can hear, to as far as you can get. So there's a need for communication resources that can pick up the slack during the time that the disaster occurs until we can get folks in here to help us mitigate the problems and recover. That's where amateur radio comes in. Versatile, mobile, self-sufficient communications resource. We can set up ad hoc networks, completely self-sufficient for 24 hours, 72 hours, or even longer. It's a very important resource. Overlay on the Cedar Fire, I'm going to put up 3 numbers. We have a problem with this resource, and we also have an opportunity. And one of the problems that we have, you see this number 8,500? That's the number of amateur licensees that we have in San Diego County, actually in the section, which is San Diego County and Imperial County. Now, could that number actually 8,500? Well, there's probably a lot of silent Ps in there. There's probably, since we have a 10-year licensing period, there's probably people that moved out of the area and didn't change their information. There's probably people that basically got their license and never used it. But even if that was 6,000, that's still a pretty hefty number. That 300, based on empirical evidence, is my best guess estimate of how many amateur radio operators were actually involved in the Cedar and Paradise fires. Order of magnitude difference between that 6,000 and 8,000 that we have, 300. Tonight, this is what I want to direct my comments to, is this 8,200 folks who are not out there doing the work, who can be of assistance to us during times of regional disaster. You never know where a disaster is going to hit. You never know where you're going to be isolated. If you have a radio, you can be part of the response and recovery process. So anyway, we got 4 basic goals we're going to do this evening, and I'm going to try to keep things moving here, because actually Steve told me I only have 45 minutes. And so we'll get through it even towards the end. I take every other word eliminated. We're going to do 4 things. I'm going to introduce you to ARIES, which I like to, your neighborhood communication watch organization here in the county. We're going to review what to expect during a regional disaster. Show you some slides of some of the things that can happen. More importantly, number 3 and number 4, we're going to identify how you can help by avoiding being part of the problem, which is probably about 90% of what you can do, unless you're a trained responder. And also give you some ways by contributing to the solution. Last but not least, we're used to working on the repeater. We do a lot of contesting, a lot of HF stuff, long distance DX, maybe short distance. Very few of us, thank God, have to worry about doing emergency calls. So it's a good place to review and describe what happens when we do emergency. Okay, San Diego ARIES, who we are. San Diego Amateur Radio Emergency Service, your neighborhood communication watch. That's what I like to call it. We supply supplemental communications. We're not first responders, but what we do is we back up the first responders. And we also support served agencies. We're volunteers. We register our qualification and our equipment with ARIES so that they know who we are and what we can do for them. The organization is sponsored by the American Radio Relay League, but you do not have to be an ARRL member to belong. You do have to be a licensed amateur. But we'll take anybody that has any type of an amateur radio license. We're administered by the section manager, who is Pat, WA6 MHC, and the section emergency coordinator, who I don't think is up here tonight. Let's see, I can remember NZ16. And they're basically cover the whole district. And we'll show you a little bit more about the organization there. We're organized by section, by district, and by locality. If you take a look at San Diego ARIES, we're basically our section is covered in two counties. We have Imperial County, which is its own district. And we also have 4 districts within San Diego County. The first one, which I just moved in there, is the Central District, which is basically the city of San Diego. Just south of that, kind of a little area, down around Chula Vista, is our Southern District. Biggest district that we have as far as geographic area is concerned is the Eastern District, but most of the population is along the I-8 corridor, so it's a little bit farther south. And finally, last but not least, here we are in the Northern District. In the Northern District, we have a number of different localities. Each one of those little green squares or circles that you see over there basically denotes where we have or have had in the recent past an emergency coordinator. And we have a pretty active organization here, at least from what I hear on Sunday mornings. We have about 90 people, 90 people. 21 of them are what we would call leadership, assistant emergency coordinators, and the district emergency coordinator, who's Tony, KC6Y SP. And the rest are people that live in their communities who check in on a regular basis to participate in that. Now, I'm really hard on it. I would have to say, just based on what I've seen from other districts, we probably have the most active district in the San Diego section. So this is really great. This, as I said before, I think I mentioned before, we had that little earthquake right during one of our boarding nests, and it worked real well. The net control was right on top of it. We had reports coming in. We immediately went through and we canvassed the emergency coordinators or the assistant emergency coordinator. They had checked in earlier, and when we determined that there wasn't a whole lot of a problem, we just kind of moved on. It really works. Now the organization is kind of hard to read on this blackboard here, or whatever type of board. This is a wall. We'll call it a wall. And but basically, you can see how we're split: the section manager, the section emergency coordinator, the various district emergency coordinators, and then we have, who I kind of consider the most important part of the organization, the emergency coordinators that are in the individual counties. And we have basically about 13 of those counties here in the organization. What we do, basically, probably our primary response is in the local community. If we have a major earthquake or major fire, where we are isolated from commercial communications, we'll basically activate our community organizations. And I call them little islands of response, because when you're talking about a regional disaster, you're talking about this isolation, that's what should be done. Between us and the CERT teams, we are the main 2 civilian organizations, not professional response organizations. We're there at the very first thing. When we're not working in our own communities, we have other organizations that we support. The Emergency Medical Service, Red Cross, the California Department of Forestry. We have people liaison with VARS, the Military Affiliate Radio Service, the RACES folks, the CERT folks. These are usually defined by what we call an MOU, or a Memorandum of Understanding. Basically what an MOU is a written document that is signed by both the CERT agency and by ours that manages expectations between the two. So they know what we can do, we know what we can do for them, what they expect. Public service, we do a lot of public service during the year. Some of them, Special Olympics, I love it in San Diego, here in our air show, my own personal favorite, trail runs, the ultra runs that they do out in East County. We do that to practice, we do that to get ourselves out in the community and make ourselves known. Meetings and trainings, second Saturday of the month. We have a breakfast meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you get on it, that's a little bit too early for you. For many people on Saturday morning today, we have our training at the Kearney Mesa Rec Center at 10 o'clock. So you can't make the breakfast meeting all you eat for $7. Try to make the training meeting if you want to. How REs responds? Thankfully, most of our response pre-disaster. Planning, training, practice, exercise. During the disaster, we would basically have 4 phases. We would have the activation and assignment. We have duty officers that are on call 24/7 that receives or can receive calls from the CERT agencies. They in turn will activate a number of different ways of notifying the membership of REs when they're example, it could be by telephone tree, it could be by beeper, it could be by email, a number of different ways to do it. Once we're activated, once we have an assignment, we deploy. We travel to the site, we set up our equipment, we're ready to go. This could be an EOC, this could be a field location, it could be in a hospital, like our emergency medical services station. Operation, both tactical and formal written traffic, we pass the information as necessary. We are basically supplemental communications, so we really don't kick in until there's really no alternative. And we're also multi-link. We'll do voice, we'll do packet, we'll do midlink, we'll do CW, we'll do what's necessary. We'll do fast, we'll do telephone, we'll even make coffee, as long as it doesn't interfere with our communications work. And our whole job is whatever information that we have, we get it through. Post-disaster, we go through a period of, I'm sorry, don't go there. Stand down. Any disaster has kind of a cycle. And toward the end of the cycle, toward the end of the disaster, we start winding down. We start mobilizing. We start bringing troops back into the field, releasing them to do other things. And this is kind of tricky sometimes because everybody's really excited. Having worked in disasters before, outside and waiting, everybody's really excited when the disaster first hits. I mean, they're not looking forward to it. The adrenaline starts. After the second or third day, everybody's trapped. Can't wait to get this thing. So one of our big problems, one of the reasons why we use it in organizations like our organization or any other defined organizations that do these things, is because of this long period where we have to have people out there, but we can't keep using the same people because we're going to wear them out. Post-disaster debriefing, lessons learned, very important. Try to figure out what we did right, try to figure out what we did wrong, if something did wrong, try to figure out how not to do it. Just some photographs showing some Artie's folks at work. This is a scene from one of our training sessions on Saturday morning. We have three of the Artie's operators here playing around with packet, the Red Cross band. Sometimes we do things on our own. Add KF6 and XY is the vendor. Yeah, there you are. I had to show this. We went out one day up over the hillside in Carlsbad, near where I live, and played around with Winland. Winland is, for you folks that don't know what Winland is, Winland is basically a way of sending emails over radio. It's kind of slick. We participate quite a bit in these public service events, mostly in practice. Here we have a couple of our units providing HF, NBIS, NBIS, no vertical, incident, skyway communications for the Lost Boys, Blair Valley Aid Station, is supposed to run off the desert. Providing race communication, safety for the folks that are running these buildings. Now normally, as a rule, we do not self-activate. We sense something is going on, we wait until we're called, we get assignments. The only exception to that is if things crash and major earthquake. Where the communication systems are so guarded, the commercial systems are so guarded, that we basically have to bring that in along the line to do something along those lines. However, every once in a while, Mother Nature gives us a heads up. For example, when we see one of these out on the horizon, there's several things we do. One of the first things we do is check our go kits. Go kits are very important. Sometimes we can accuse of spending way too much time on the go kit. The go kit is basically all the equipment, all the supplies, all the materials that we need to operate independently with commercial power, of a nice warm bag, of real food, and 4 tasting water. For 24/7, 2 hours a day. A lot of us, we have these go kits in our vehicles, or we have them sitting here in front of the garage like this one, and when we're ready to go, we're all in the vehicle, and we're up. Now, where we go, sometimes we end up, for example, one of these Red Cross shelters, which held service in San Bernardino during the fires in 2003, at the airport of San Bernardino, one of the hangars. Very noisy place, very stressful place, very sad place. Sometimes, instead of serving the serve agencies helping the victims, we're behind the front lines helping the first responders. For example, this scene from the Paradise Park. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move along. Second part, talking a little bit about our agency, is we're really coming to our own as an organization during regional disasters. And the basic disasters that we can expect in this area: earthquakes, wildfire, hazardous material, and unfortunately terrorism. As if we don't have enough problems from Mother Nature, we have to worry about people getting to the place. That's the road we're living in. The type of disruptions that we have, police and fire, wireless communications or communications that do have left overloaded, electricity, very vulnerable as is most of our government facilities, transportation network, the roads, the highways, freeway overpasses, all those things. Less of a problem, but still can be affected by, say, a big earthquake. Could be gas supply. One of the reasons was County San Diego County Metropolitan Water District is building all those reservoirs, Lake Hodges, really cool again, is because all of our water comes from across the fault lines. Each one of our major sources of water crosses the San Diego Swamp. And they estimate that if we lose aqueduct from Colorado or run up to northern part of the state, we could be without water from those sources for 6 months. So this is something that you won't be watering your lawn. The bottom line, when you read the information that's provided by the American Red Cross, that you have to be ready. Be on your own for 72 hours. What does that mean? Provide your own water, provide your own food, provide your own light, provide your own heat. Things that they don't tell you, like don't expect the policeman to come by, assuming that you get to the police station. Unless it's really emergency. Even that, you may not be able to do that. Ditto, fire. You're really basically on your own for 72 hours. Regional disasters. Why do we call them regional disasters? Because they're all over the place. This is a satellite photo, NOAA's weather satellite of the 2003 fire, including the ones up in Ventura County, the ones up in Riverside, of course, the ones that we had down there in San Diego. You can see those systems, whether earthquakes would be similar. When the emergency, the disaster first occurs, it's a very, what I would call, fluid situation. Your information has, and you need, has information on the movement of planes or the extent of damage that's being destroyed by the disaster that you're responding to. And all of a sudden, you're forced to rely on secondary systems to move your resources. In the case of the Cedar Fire, one of the numbers that stuck in my head in the Wildland Fire is that at one time, Cedar Fire was moving 12,000 to 14,000 acres an hour. That's an awful lot of land. And those of you that were here earlier saw the animation that I had to see and how the boarding of when the fire was first discovered, the boarding afterwards, in San Diego, how fast that went towards the coast. That was just nothing to do, except stay out of the way. Talk about electrical systems, and did a little research on electrical systems. It's kind of interesting. When we're talking about disasters, wildfires, your power poles get burned up, your towers get burned up, your electrical lines are often shut off purposely by the electric company to eliminate all of the emissions. One of the things I read about in earthquakes, though, is that utilities handle the electric system on these electric substations. Anybody know why? Okay, electrical engineering. These substations are full of porcelain insulators. And when they're shook up, guess what happens? You have a whole bunch of broken porcelain. Which means they don't get so good. It means the stations have to be shut down so it can be repaired. And considering the fact that these stations are basically one of the primary hubs of the electric system, then you have problems. one thing for a tower to go down or a hill to go down, but basically stabilize the situation. And when these cables go, you're out of luck. This one I borrowed from the East Coast. The East Coast has their own problem, which I don't know what them a bit. They have their rotates, they have their rotates. They can have their rotates. This points out the vulnerability of communication systems. It's not damaged in a disaster like an earthquake or a major wildfire. It's often overloaded. You remember the Northridge earthquake back in 1994, but at about the same time there was an earthquake in Japan, the Kobe earthquake. And one of the most highly seismically designed countries in the world, 5,000 people in this earthquake. One of the things they looked at was the communication system. One of the problems they had was the loss of the communication system was so massive that they couldn't move their fire resources, fighting resources to people that need it. They took a look at their cell phone records and they found rates of cell phone use on the remaining systems 50 to 100 times the maximum design limit of those systems, which translates to a whole bunch of business. Now, transportation systems, what can I say? This was from the Northridge earthquake back in 1994. This was an access ramp to I-20. Just think if we get a magnitude 7 plus around this area. Think about 78. Think about how you're going to get from one part of town to another if you lose a lot of the overpasses on I-5 and 78. Amateur radio regional disasters. Again, with supplemental communications, not first choice. Basically because of security, basically because of damage. Communications emergency, disruption in normal communications. That's when we come into our own. That's where we start being utilized as a resource. The breakdown of normal systems indicates the need for ad hoc amateur radio networks. People like us have to go out, set up our stations, broadcasting traffic from one point to another. Indeed. As normal systems break down, stress level increases on both people and on equipment. This cartoon kind of sums up everything. For you folks in the back that can't read very well because we don't have the best background here, we have a tornado about ready to hit the Acme Manure Company, which is right next door to the Acme Fan Company. And for you people that are text-based, primary reliance on amateur radio nets indicate that somewhere, somehow, waste products are being roped in here. We have children here, that's about as far as I'm going to go. I want you to keep that in mind when we're talking about emergency response, because when we're being utilized, because we really have to do it. How you can help, 2 ways. One, probably for you folks that are not trained responders, avoiding being part of the problem. And the second one is contributing to some of the ways that you can help out. We'll talk about that in the presentation. During avoiding being a problem during an emergency, you're going to see the P word a lot for me. Be prepared. Know what type of hazard you face. Know how to respond to those hazards. Have personal response plans in place for you and your family, so you know what to do in case of an earthquake, in case of wildfire, in case some rank out individual decide to blow up something, so that you know what to do in these situations. When you're actually in one of these situations, be safe. One of the ways you can do that is to limit travel and limit your sightseeing. First thing you're going to do, if you're all amateur radio licensees, is you're going to turn on your radio. Listen to things. Keep the frequencies clear. Because bandwidth is precious. And unlike the internet, and unlike some of the satellite systems, we don't have as much bandwidth as we would like. Don't spread rumors or unverified information. Rule of thumb, early in the disaster, all information is unverified. That's including at DOC. You really don't know what's going on until you get out there. You have that one person at one site looking in one direction. So it takes time to get good information. Most important, the first thing we have, the first inclination that most of us have in disaster, especially if we have to live with specialized training, is to go and try to find some places on the world. Kind of resistant. Allow the service at agencies that we have wait until it's requested, and please only respond if you have the appropriate statement. How many people have wildland fire? Oh, that's good. So, that should be almost a prerequisite for this area. Because even if you live along the coast, if you're out there in the back forty, in county, wildland fires are like any other type of fire that you're going to see. They're fast, they're new, aggressive, and they really get involved. So if you have an opportunity, I know you just told about 4 courses over about the last month or so. If you get the opportunity to take this wildland fire, you won't regret it. I'm being prepared. Every community that wants to take human aid has to have a community response. That yellow on my brain for some reason. This loud orange handout that I gave you, it has most of the real important stuff. So if you don't want to take copies, or you don't want to take notes, here. Has a number of websites that you go to, URL. And one of the URLs that we have is for the city of Harlem. That's where I live. And it's the link to the emergency operations plan. These cities have basically gone through the risk analysis for you. They have taken a look at the situation within their towns, and I do believe that just about every time in Will County, town and city in Will County has one of these plans, or should have one of these. And they basically tell you what the city expects and the probability. They all do a risk analysis. So you don't have to try to figure out by going to the internet just what's going to happen. It's already been done for you. You can take that information from the response plan, and you can develop your own family response plan. How do you do that? Well, you go to the website that I have on the handout, American Red Cross, FEMA. Give you all sorts of information on what type of experiences you should expect in an earthquake, or a wildfire, or a tornado, or terrorism, or any of these other things, and what you can do to protect yourself. Oops. Okay. Basic disaster kit. Everybody should have a decent $72 basic kit. Food, water, first aid supplies, toys for the kids, shelter. If you're not going to be sheltering in place. Go to one of these websites, American Red Cross, FEMA. That's all you have to do. My own personal recommendation is, if you can, CPR, AED, that's those automatic electronic defibrillators that you see in airports and other public places, first aid center. Also the wildland fire. There's 2 reasons. First is, you won't become an expert first aid provider by doing all these courses, but you'll know. But most importantly, is a confidence builder. One of the worst things that can happen during an emergency is to develop what I call high flood factor. FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The more you know about what might happen, the better you are at responding. And one of the things that we, in our families, that we really fear is somebody being in. So by having some basic emergency training, first aid, CPR, AED training, it builds your confidence in the fact that if you have an emergency, or you're part of a disaster, then you feel that much better because if something does happen, at least you know where to start. Also, last but not least, I'm being prepared. You can handle the radio. Talk about that in the next slide. Some basic things that you should be able to do with the radio that you have at the time of your day. I'm not talking about the cable radio that you have in your cabin. I'm talking about the HP that you might have in your car and stuck on I-5 because the overcast. You should be able to turn it on and off. You laugh. But you take a look at some of these modern transceivers, these handy talkies, they're built for size, not exactly for easy use. And it's kind of hard to figure out which button it is. And it's a new unit, and you take and put it into the back of the car or underneath the seat or something like that. You know, that's a tough first step to get over. You don't know it or not. You should be able to adjust the volume of the stuff so that you can receive it volume and making sure that you're receiving signals from the TV. For simplex operation, it's basically one frequency just talking back and forth. You should be able to set the manual frequency. And for repeaters, you should be able to set the band, the receive frequency, the offset frequency, the direction, and the tone, if needed. And yes, it would be better if you can quickly remember it. On the other hand, emergency situation, you're not going to be sitting there constantly the book trying to figure out how to do that. Because, quite frankly, most of the instructions you get from the equipment vendors, builders, are no better than the teaching how it works. You should have basic instructions. Don't try to commit that to memory, but at least write it down someplace to keep it in the radio. You should have a gain antenna. Those little handy talkies that you have, the little finger looking antenna, not very good. Not very good. You should have a longer antenna, at least a quarter wave antenna. 2 meters, that would be about 16, 17 inches. Preferably, you would have a roll-up backlit, roll-up cable antenna. You have a little picture on there. I know you need a magnifying glass to see it. You have a little picture of a nice little cheap roll-up cable that was made out of $300 flimsy television cable. And they work real well. I have several of them. They really do work well. You should have a spare charge battery. You should have a notepad and tests. And you should get some weekly practice on this. You know how to operate. Remember all these things you're supposed to be able to do. Here's a picture of a representative sample. We have the directory, so we have the frequencies there. We have a spare battery. We have a AA battery case. This is a spare battery in which you put 4 AA batteries into it. And then you can hook it up to your HD. And the AA battery case is kind of nifty because if for some reason both of your other batteries go dead, then you can find somebody with some AA. You can still operate. Usually about half the power they include with a fully charged regular battery. That's the way you get up. Notebook and pencil. Here's that little gain antenna. This is an SMA-24 made by Comet. It's very flexible, so you can carry it, wear it on your belt, and carry it in top of yourself. There's a little instruction card for the radio, and there's the full wave 300 ohm television streaming cable. Now, normally I don't talk too much about commercial products, but I will talk about this because I think these are really nifty and very useful. There's Bernie, the N6FN. Is he here tonight? There he is. You'll vouch for me. I'm not getting paid for this announcement.
I'm surprised.
Nor do I want to. But one of the problems I said before, we give the instructions for the manufacturer of these radios. They're not very well written from the standpoint of somebody who wants to use the radio yourself. And so what you need to do is figure out what you need to do, and you need to write it down. Basically, Bernie has done this for us. He's got a little company out in Escondido. I've got the URL on the sheet. Check it out. I bought one for my HD. I like it so much I ended up buying it for all my other reasons. The only problem I have, Bernie, is that we're over 40-year-old guys. Really tough to do. Yeah, I will have to use that thing. I wear progressives half the time. But anyway, shameless plug. Okay, safety. Talk a little bit about safety here. Safety flows from preparation. Again, the key word, safe. If you have your personal response plans for the things that you're expecting, you'll know how to be safe. That's one of the things you're going to learn about those response plans, just putting together those response plans. Staying put. If you're going to stay put, make sure that you know where the safe places are. An earthquake, the safest place to be not in your home. It's always in your backyard, depending on how much damage you have. Remember aftershocks after a major earthquake. We have a 7 or 7.5 go off on one of the faults. You can almost rest assured you'll have 1 or 2 of these still. Magnitude aftershocks. If you're bugging out, if you have to evacuate, go to the safe spots out of the go, make sure you have these 2 evacuation try to take a route that doesn't use one of the major highways, like I-5, like 78, like 15. Because those are the ones with the overpasses and during an earthquake, you might use ones that are going to be blocked first. For your entire family, you should have one counter, out-of-area contact, family member, close friend. So that if your family is separated, you're at work downtown San Diego, and your spouse is back at home with the kids are in school, and they all have to be evacuated to a different place, they've got one central person. And even for us people that are going to go out and respond, it's very important because just like we tell our volunteers, you and your family's safety come first. It's really no good to us as a responder during a disaster if you're worried about your family. I always quote, you should be safe, the family should be safe, only then should you consider volunteering. Okay, making an emergency plan. This is pretty good information. A lot of you are experts that are basically trained in this. This is directed more towards those people that will never make one, hopefully will never have to make one. We're going to go through kind of in a logical manner. On the back of the handout, on the other side where the URL or where the websites are, I have it basically written out, so you really don't have to take notes. One of the reasons I made this handout two-sided, made it out of one paper, because I hope you use it. Put them in a safe place, you laminate it, you put them in the plastic. And if you have offices like I do, I have a paper reading desk. You can sit there, you put something down, and then if you want to find it, it takes about 45 minutes. But what I did was I went over Staples, and I found a lot of paper items. If it's not fluorescent, I can show you that it's so bright. Hoping that when I make these up, I give them to you, you put them away someplace, next time I'm searching. That's the reason for that. Okay, when do you make an emergency call? Well, if you prepare, remember the B word again, then you'll probably have a pretty good idea of what help is needed. That's why it's especially important to have some type of first aid training, because some very bloody situations are really relatively vital. If you know what you're doing, at least you have some exposure to it, you can avoid making that emergency call. Force system down, you do what you have to do. The FCC, we won't go through the various FCC code sections, but basically 401, 403, 405 in Part 97 gives us some guidance. And it can basically boil down to three things. The first thing is that during communication emergencies, you should only use the amateur airwaves for disaster purposes. Passing information to help respond to disaster. That's 401. 403 has to do with, is there an emergency situation? What can you do in order to get help if you're in distress? And basically, just by, you can use your radio, you can use telephone, you can use fax, you can shoot up rockets, you can do just about anything. But it has to be an emergency situation. That's the same for 405, which is if you're in distress, just about anything. Now that doesn't mean that if you're sitting there and you need a pizza or you have a hangnail and it's right in the middle of a disaster, you can use the radio for that. Because in a situation where they have to deploy resources for such frivolous things, you will be second guessed. They will come after you, they will talk.
Also means that there will be your timing. For example, modified amateur radio operating on these bands. When you get through, they will answer the emergency. And in previous cases, they have compensated just for that.
Yeah, it does happen, but when I'm talking about disaster situations, it's a very good point. Just like in life. Why do we all have lawyers at one time or another? It's because we can't read off the laws. There's so many of them, and they're so prohibitive. Do what you have to do during an emergency. Just be advised that after an emergency, there may be some questions. That's all you can say. I mean, personally speaking, if I need to use the radio, I have it there. I'm going to do it, and I'll figure out how to do it. How to respond to it without it. But we don't want to tell folks not to do something if they really need it. Because that's the whole purpose, or one of the major purposes of amateur radio, is in an emergency we're able to help them during the So, yeah, there are no type of things to talk about? Well, injuries, primarily, significant hazards that may result in injuries. People first, property second. Making and first. I have two button buttons. One goes forward, one goes back. That's what I'm trying to make. Safety first, staying calm. Don't call until you're in a safe place. See the fire front approaching you, get out of the way first. Doesn't help if you're trying to respond to what the next person is saying, and you're running from the flames. Out of breath, can't make a lot of noise that. Compose yourself. Take a deep breath and sound common sense slow. 1,000, 2,000, whatever way you want to do it. Sounds hokey? You train paramedics to do it. Paramedics can do it. You gotta get yourself calm. The adrenaline will be flowing, I'll show you. The whole goal is to talk in a calm, slow, normal voice. Try to speak across the mic, avoid distortion. One of the things I've heard on the radio several times during emergency situations, you get somebody that's not familiar with working the radio, they start yelling into the mic. And the distortion is so bad, you just can't do it. You can't even tell them to slow down. It's yelling into the mic. Not good. Get calm, try to control yourself. Get to the habit when you're using the mic to talk about it. Another good thing about staying calm is writing the message down. Compose it on paper before you send it. Because not only is that aid to being brief, because we're much lazier pushing a pencil than we are talking, but it also calms you down, because if you're writing something, you're concentrating on something. Most keep in mind, you only concentrate on one thing at a time. If you're writing something down, you aren't being careful. What to say? Who? Identify yourself. Call sign, please. You need to call sign properly. Where? And I always put that as second because if for some reason the transmission is interrupted, then at least they have an idea that there's somebody at the location. So I like to use that as second. Street intersection, road and mile markers, landmarks, GPS coordinates, Thomas guide coordinates, anything that is direct and concise as possible. And it's really localized for them. If they need to send somebody, they have a pretty good idea what happened? Try to describe the situation in as few words as possible, any injuries, any damage. And when? What time did the injuries and damage occur? It's also very important because if they're going to, it could mean the difference between sending a life flight helicopter after you or sending a ground ambulance. Yeah.
That's a great observation. I've heard a number of people fly to make out because they think the emergency. They're driving down the freeway and they don't get all that who, where, what happened, all that. And I always wonder why you just don't stop. Because they go, oh, I don't know, I think I just passed down to Toronto Timber Drive. Or whatever. Just stop. And then get all this stuff out. Calling on the freeway and saying that you just saw some car smoking, you don't have any information. It's just so useless to the next time we get out.
And that's true, but you know, the thing is that when you're in a situation like that, you know, hopefully you have to do something. And so people keep driving and keep doing what they're doing. That's one of the reasons why we need to like put one in your car, sit there, and see an emergency, and remember that the rest of it will go on the side of the what do you need to do? Okay, making yourself understood. Very important, especially in situations where the transmission gap between you and the person you're talking to is not the best in the world. Short, simple, plain language phrases, keep on your TV talking, cue signals and all those sort of things at home, because the person on the other end of that radio may not be familiar with those. Try to write it out if possible. Again, writing helps to be brief, be clear, and be precise. Be prepared to repeat critical information. Sometimes this requires a little bit of patience, especially under bad propagation conditions. I know HF, especially probably some spots like where we're at right now, is not very good. So we do a lot of that repeating when we're using this confirm correct. Make sure that when you give information to the person on the other end, they come back to you confirming that they have that information that they understand it. Try to understand and use basic pro words, which are basically words that have a numbers and meaning. Operators, radio operators. Try to use standard phonetics and numbers. If you have a number, for example, and you're on 60th Street, don't say 60. Use each of the numeral 7, 6, 7. I gave you a list on your handout of basic pro words, and so I won't go through these. They're just basic ones that you learn. Maybe not on the repeater, but certainly if you're in the HF or BS and that type of thing, you'll know these. So I'll leave that to you to read on the handout. Standard ITU phonetics. This is really handy to know. I know some of you folks came up with the able color dog one, and they don't want to use the new standard stuff. Some of them do. They'll use other words like apple, banana, cherry, daiquiri, eggplant, fungus. There's a reason why we have standard ITU phonetics. That happens to be the bulk of most of society that we live in. For example, if you take the word Nima, or help. So I'm talking to Larry. I say, the first thing I say, Larry. I spell Nima, help, or I think. Say you have a Japanese operator. Japanese operators, they don't do help. Okay? So they'll say Nima. Now you notice Nima and Nima, especially when you have half that sound straightforward, right? Now what if that word, instead of Nima, was low? You say low. You can talk to on the other end. Row. Two different words, two different meanings.
Excuse me, just realized something.
Yes?
It just annoys me, you're on HF, and you just can't make out this guy's call sign because he's using this alphabet you've never heard anywhere. Just realize you can tell him to sit up. Standard, sit up. It never dawned on
Well,
me.
you know, one way of handling
Hey,
that
sit
is
up,
that
man.
when you're listening, or if you're talking to this person on HF and they're using
It's just a moment.
apple, banana, cherry, daiquiri type of thing, then what you can do is you can come back and say, copy Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. And usually they'll get the idea that, and they'll say, copy, which is their way of saying, or Roger or whatever. So, sometimes you got to help them a little bit. If you don't understand the language they're using, which I must admit this in the HF is dozens of them, then just go back and listen. Make sure that you understand what's going on. Anyway, this is good. What I like to do is work with my speed up with something like this is I'll go down the street and I'll go right down the street. This is apple, or alpha, of course, some of these streets will have signs. So big long ones. Anyway, they're actually making the call. Cool thing about directed nets and net control. Emergency disaster type situation, you're probably going to be dealing with a directed net. What is a directed net? Very simply, all transmissions are authorized by somebody called the net control or net control station. This net control station is usually one person. I underline it. One person that directs the net. They're very busy and high stress job, a lot of distractions, a lot of systems. Net control station calls the shots, please follow instructions. If you just put yourself in the person's place as net control and just realize they're in the center of the whirlwind. Everything is coming to them. Everybody in the world is talking to them and trying to get information out of them. Then, and have a little mercy on the person, and things will go much smoother. Contacting the net control station. Now, there are some of you folks that are in emergency response and I'm doing controversial. I'm trying to look at this from the rank amateur/newbie side. So it may not be exactly what we do on the Sunday morning as or some of the other events that we work, but I'm trying to cut it at aiming this at you. So that's basically what I'm coming from. Okay, listen before transmitting. Try to avoid transmissions unless you really have to. Try to avoid the case of the state. Push to talk button. All right, what make you push to talk? Push it for about 1 second. What I like to do is push and count 1, 2, then start talking. Don't push it to start talking, especially on the computer, because sometimes it takes a second or two for the computer to pick up the transmission. So to do that, what's going to happen is you're going to cut off that push button. Push it for about 1 second, then say net control. This is an Alpha Kilo 6 KF Juliet or whatever flavor it calls on the computer. So show me speed range. The reason I say net control this is because if you forget to push that push to talk button for 1 second and you start talking, then by the time you get net control should be able to hear you by the time you get to this is. Your call sign, the most important part of it, is still there. Okay, when acknowledged, net control will come back and say something like, just recognize it, say something like, go ahead, Alpha Kilo 6 Juliet or something along that line. Then transmit your message, and then with over. Again, on repeaters, you don't use over. You don't repeat. But in this case, you would. The reason is two things. First one is that this tells net control that you're expecting to reply. You're probably able to reply. You're expecting to reply. The second thing is that by using over, net control now understands that you're a newbie. And now that you're a newbie, net control will adjust to make sure that he or she is getting the information that you want. Okay. Following this, you're going to be going back and forth. You're going to be passing information back and forth. You're going to be getting instructions. You're going to be fulfilling information, blah, blah, blah. Just follow the instructions of net control. These people are usually the most experienced folks in an organization. They have to be completed, and they will be good. Now, the most controversial portion of the entire evening is breaking into an active net. People are talking. It's an emergency situation. You have to get through it. You can't afford to wait. All right. Use of break, emergency, and mayday. We'll take emergency and mayday first. Emergency and mayday. Universal. Meaning that something bad is happening. You need help now. It's the equivalent of flying fire in an open field. Or fire in a crowded field. So whenever you use emergency and mayday, you will get results very quickly. Break and break. In a perfect world, you would use break for priority traffic on the queue, and we would use break for emergency traffic. Or in some cases, if it's really emergency, break. Just screen break. However, this is not working for you. We have a lot of people. First thing is that the use of break the way I just stated, you're not universally use break first. And I still hear a lot of people, even on our YouTube, they want to break into a normal conversation. You're bold, they want a traffic report, a little break. First thing you can try to report. That's not really the best use of break. You should just use your call sign and state one word or so, for example, AK-16 or AK-16 that you have. Then people know that you're looking for information related to that. Because when we use break in situations like that, we kind of dilute the meaning of that for emergency. And I guess the best way of saying this is that in an emergency, you have to practice. You need to get yourself across. You will find some way of making sure that people understand it's an emergency. And believe me, once we understand on the computer, on the net, that there's an emergency going on, everybody except that control will go. And then you take the person that's reporting the emergency net, anybody else who can help will be brought into the net. That is one thing I can assure you, is that if you get an emergency net, everybody goes off and you'll get responsibility. Okay, after the initial call, your job isn't over. Because now that you need the initial call, you just can't walk away. You don't need to go. You need to monitor the net control station for further instructions and requests. Maybe talk about all the messages from the net control. You should acknowledge all transmissions to you because net control gets very antsy when they lose people. For example, you are now part of the net, you respond when you're called, you start getting worried. Try to remember to ID, use your call sign as the independent exchange. Remember, an emergency situation still requires to ID yourself or the FCC level. Most emergency transmissions are short. At the end of the exchange, not at the end of when you say something, at the end of the whole exchange. You're not doing any additional transmissions to that control. They need to use your ID. Don't leave the net unless authorized. Again, be worried about it. But if competent authority on the scene tells you to turn off the radio, turn it off. No questions asked. Don't say goodbye. Don't pull over to these switches. Volume or anything like that. Just turn it off. What do you think it's doing? Yes.
One way you might be, especially if it's close to the light,
Right.
not secure.
It could be an explosive device. It could be a hazardous material situation where you have flammable vapors. And that radio that you have is an ignition source. Could be a number of different things. However, if the basement or apartment tells you to turn it off, you turn it off. And then when it's safe, you shut that in. Don't forget that you're still on the net. Just make sure that you get to a safe place and you can shut that. When the net is finished with you, that's what it's for. The net doesn't really want any more people. Net control doesn't want any more people on the net than it's right, if you have to leave, for any reason, let me know. That doesn't mean that, if nature calls, you can't return. Just make sure the net knows. You don't have to go into great detail. You're going to be away. They don't want to. They worry about you, but there are limits. Okay. Anyway, that's the emergency part. Any questions or any just a few more slides. You all get going. All right, being part of the solution. Two things that I just want you to read back. First one is kind of a request. Even if you have no interest in doing emergency communications work, joining our opioid system, or some of the other kind of organizations that we have, as well as all of those at least invest. It is an investment. An hour and a half. All we're asking, 1 hour and a half over free Sunday morning. 8:30, we have our RE's North County Net. 3 sessions. First session, all I want you to do is listen. Listen to the net control station, listen to the responses, get an idea how the net operates. The second time, you check us out. Get a piece of paper and pencil, and copy down those folks that are in your community, their call sign. Like they will tell you the call sign, they will tell you what community you're in. So that you'll have a list of people that you know in your community that are these emergency. Facing a disaster, I can come for you. Third thing is participate. And the third time, come in, listen to the net, and at the very end, when you ask for your check in. But how do you want to do that? You're willing to make that investment every Saturday morning, make sure your equipment works and they're practicing. We want to have. You got 90 people, 91, 92, 100. Plus the technical operators out there. Anyway, love to have it. Check in. Sure. Yes.
No, it's 8:30, where?
8:30, as a matter of fact, it's the 146.7 Street. You have a list of repeaters, it's the first one at the top of the list. I think on the front side of your handout, at the very bottom, you have the list of 3 part 2-meter repeaters. That's the 173. 73 repeaters. Where the trivia contest will help you. So, yeah, you just do that. Just go about an hour and a half. At least you have a little bit of trouble. You don't want to play with them anymore. That's still the best. Give you an idea. Prepare we tell you there's going to be training programs. Guess what? Many of those training programs are not just open to members of those organizations. I mean, I've gone to Red Cross training, I've gone to CDF training, I've gone to RA's training, of course, since I'm a member, I've gone to RACE's training. And even though, at times, I was not a member of any of these organizations, they welcomed me with open arms. Rather than fire training, if they have room for it, they'll be more than happy to take it. First aid training is only something they didn't. But there are still opportunities for things like that. And of course, our Saturday morning training session at 10 o'clock on the basic person. Open to anybody. Anybody wants to come in? Great.
Gary,
Yes, sir.
a few minutes at the end, please.
Sure. Last but not least, consider volunteering. I've given you some information on ours. Please come and check us out. If not us, one of the other fine organizations, we all need help, and we can use all the members we can get with. Yeah.
One of the things that's very good practice is to listen to the traffic understanding what people and practice writing your messages as they're crossed, because that's a skill that you need to develop. And join in and take some of those messages and pass them. Very good practice. Very useful in emergency.
Joe is one of our rescue control stations on the back, and if you check in on on Sunday morning, she will be more than happy to register when the traffic is going to be a great.
Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, at 8 o'clock.
Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night at 8 o'clock. If you want to check that out. See any other questions? Yes, Art.
Suggestion that I could make on 147-67-763 procedures.
Yeah.
We do have the capability of invoking the 107.2 zone. We get interference, we have problems with that, we had to invoke that. So we recommend that everybody program that in to their HD or radio as well as found necessary, so that if EL is invoked, we'll still be able to get through the
That's a good point. For you folks that understand what he was saying is that there is no tone, that there's no necessary tone on the 70-tier machine. However, it will use 107.2. So it won't hurt you to have that program into your machine.
The other thing to remember is there's always a 107.2 on the output. If you have decode, you have more than one repeater coming in, you will only hear the Palomar repeater being invoked to 107.2 on decode.
Okay. Anybody, any other questions? Yeah.
One of the things that has bugged me through the years since recharging the batteries has come to me is taking something up that you had to recharge the battery from and drain out on something at a time. So for each of my HDs, and I've got them from 440 and 220 and 2 I have two dry cell battery packs for each radio. When we go into daylight saving time, I take one of the battery packs, dump the batteries, I don't care whether I use them or not, and put in a fresh set of today's batteries. And I mark the date on there with a disc, and then the next year, I do the same thing with the other battery pack. So I've always got a fresh set that I stack onto the radio, and I don't have to worry, I'm good for hours, so if I have to do things like this. But, as Pat knows, we've got, over at age 17, those batteries will go down real quick when you put them in storage, and you're not using the radio.
That's why it's always good to have one of those battery cases that you can use AA batteries on. Because if you're, a lot of us, we play with our radios all the time, so we keep up on this. But some of you might have that HD, but you might have it for emergency situations. Think about getting one of those battery cases, because if your primary battery is worn out because you haven't played with your HD in months, at least you can take that battery case, you can find 4 AA batteries someplace. Steal them from your kids' equipment. Your iPod or something, wherever, I don't even know what the iPod is. Do it. Yeah.
There's two listings on that should be was 8:30 on Sunday for North County, and on your sheet it says there's a net at 7 a.m.
Right. The net that's in a box on the upper right-hand side of the front page is the section RE. So that is, you'll hear Pat and you'll hear us talk really good network.